Hey! 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 This is library.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 9 of the Tell Me About That Book podcast. Short conversations about some of the best books on personal growth, mindset, fitness, and business topics with some of the leaders in the fitness industry. Today we're talking about legacy, what the All Blacks can teach us about the business of life, 15 lessons in leadership, and that's by James Kerr. Any money made with sponsorships or affiliate links for this podcast will go directly to Inner City Weightlifting. You can find out more about that at tellmeaboutthatbook.com or continuefit.com. That's where I have everything. All right, for today's show, I have on Brian Sipotz. He's the owner of Advantage Strength in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He also owns hockeystrengthandconditioning.com, and he actually hosts the Hockey Strength podcast for the site. So we have another podcaster on. Brian, thanks for coming on.
And thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do it.
All right. Well, this is cool. This is a little different for me because when I started the idea about the podcast, I just picked people that posted a lot about books. So I said, okay, I know they're book lovers, and they're gonna, they can spare 20 minutes every 8-9 weeks. And, you weren't in that original lineup, but you listened to one of them. You really liked the feel of the show. And so I'm kind of excited for like somebody else that wanted to be on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be a little bit more of a closet book nerd. I'm to the point now where, and I want to say it was Alan Cosgrove who just kind of said, like, he's at a point where he can't read a new book until he rereads one that he's already read.
Yeah.
And for me, Legacy was one of those. I mean, it sort of floored me to begin with, but I just keep going back to it. And I wanted to talk about it. I know it's popular in this, especially in this industry, but for me, it sort of brought a lot of pieces of the puzzle together. So.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many great lessons in it. But hey, let's. Why don't you just give a summary of the book first?
Yeah. So, like you said, James Kerr is the author, and he basically had the opportunity to spend some time in the All Blacks camp. So, the New Zealand All Blacks is the national rugby team for New Zealand, and it's like one of those things where it's a boyhood dream. For anybody growing up in New Zealand to be a part of this organization. And so for James Kerr, this was his chance to be a part of the organization. And basically what he did is he went in and observed just to see what makes them the most, I guess, successful sporting franchise or club in any sport. So they have, it was something like 75% win percentage, and now they're up to like 83 or 84% win percentage over the lifetime of the club, which is just absurd. So he had the chance to go in and observe, and basically what happened is, and you can tell from the title of the book, he came out with 15 lessons in leadership, 15 things that the All Blacks do that makes their culture what it is and makes their success a part of the culture. So what it is it's essentially a business book through a sports lens, which I think is my being a businessman and I guess an entrepreneur, you might say, and a former athlete. That's what really made it hit home for me.
Yeah, agreed. I think what's interesting too is I think I know for me, I kind of assumed where the book was going, but I really thought there was going to be a little bit more about the some of the things they did as athletes, right? And it's just the opposite. It's so awesome about how they develop their competitive advantage, and that is really through building that culture. And I think there's so many things in there, and I think with you being a former professional athlete, you really understand some of these things that would almost like look back on some teams probably, and you're like, yeah, I wish we did that a little bit more. Like he starts out the book with sweeping the shed. Wasn't that a great kind of lesson in humility?
And so that's kind of looking forward to other things that we'll bring up here for sure. The sweep the sheds was, I remember. So I listened to the book first. I remember where I was, what I was doing when that lesson was taught, when that lesson came up. And it's such a beautiful thing. And I think I had just read Joe Ehrman's book too, talking about servant leadership and talking about how his high school seniors are the ones who serve the younger kids. And so this sort of brought that lesson full circle, and it just makes so much sense. So just to sort of summarize, if you haven't, if you're not familiar with it, Sweep the Sheds, basically, they tell the story of after a win, or after any game, but after this one particular win, the team's in the locker room, and they have their sort of debrief meeting, and then the team gets showered up and leaves. And the last 3 guys to leave the room are the captains, and 2 of them were former World Rugby Players of the Year. So these are studs. These are the absolute highest level players, and they're the last 3 in the room, cleaning up and sweep the sheds is the locker room, sweeping up the locker room. So they're the ones doing the cleaning, and the whole lesson is, I guess, just about humility and how you're never too big to do the small things. And I see that as servant leadership. And again, as a former athlete and as an entrepreneur and somebody who's in charge of a staff here, that's just an incredible lesson for me is just to never be too big to do those small things, like especially around our facility here. But there's a lot of teams, like I also coach high school hockey, and it's it's kind of scummy sometimes where you get seniors who think they have the right to treat younger players like trash. And really, if we can flip that on its head and make sure that the seniors are the ones who are serving the younger players, I think that just makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it really does. And I think, from a business perspective, like you said, too, is I remember I've told this story before, but when I was in the bar business as a manager, I would make sure on their busy nights that I went around and, on the floor and cleaned up glasses. Now, we had busboys and waitresses, and they could have certainly done that. But then sometimes, people would leave glasses in weird locations, right, in a club. And I would always I know it's a little shady, but I'd always try to make sure that the busboys saw me doing it. Just because, even though I wanted to do it, I also wanted them to know, I'm here for you. I'm not too big. I'm running this place, and I'm not too big to do this stuff and make sure. And, they would at first, they got a little nervous, oh, no, but I didn't make it like I was mad at them. I just, I went, picked them up, brought them to the bar, boom. So I think they understood. And I think you get a lot more respect from people when you're doing that type of thing.
Yeah, and not only that, you are by default sort of setting a standard, So if I'm walking through the facility and I see, a piece of trash or a wrapper or something on the floor, I'll pick it up and put it in the garbage. And when people see that, when my coaches see that, or if our operations people see that, then all of a sudden they're thinking, okay, well, that wasn't up to par before, and now it is. So it's a great way to sort of set a standard and make that a part of the culture. So it just drives that stuff a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. What are some other takeaways for you from the book?
Takeaways. So the way the book's set up, they talk about the 15 lessons, and each lesson gets its own chapter, basically. And so, for me, I think the most influential chapters are, there's one of the lessons is play with purpose. And basically that's finding your why. And we go back to this. I mean, I know you're a big proponent of this. Coach Boyle's a big proponent of this, is just finding the why. But basically, if you've solidified your why, number one, you're going to have a unified team. So for us at the gym here, it's our common purpose. The reason we exist is to build confidence and to inspire an active life. So all of our decisions are based on that reason. So instead of just pushing people to lift the most weight possible, we think what's going to give this person the most confidence, what's going to give them the biggest boost for the day. And so finding that why really kind of makes a unified team. And people, and we've heard this before, people buy why you do what you do. They don't necessarily buy what you do.
Yeah.
So if you can create a culture or an environment where the why is really clear, not necessarily because you say it all the time, but because your actions demonstrate it, then you're going to have a much more successful business. And that's the idea of that chapter in the book, is that the purpose-driven companies are going to be the ones of the future.
Also, one thing I was just thinking of is, in our business, sometimes people can find it's hard to find some of those, sometimes people think we're not saving the world, right? But you are, like you just said, all right, Brian, for those that don't know, Brian mostly worked with hockey players, and now he's going into more general population in his facility. But there was a time you probably can think, okay, what am I doing? I'm making kids better hockey players. And that's it, right? If you don't look a little deeper into what you're really trying to do.
It's that whole, there's two bricklayers that are doing their work. One looks really happy and one looks pretty down in the dumps, and you walk up to him and you say to the one who doesn't look so happy, you say, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm laying bricks." And then you walk to the one who's happy and whistling and cheerful, and you ask him what he's doing, and he says, "I'm building a temple." So it's all about the why and why you do what you do. And to be honest with you, on the hockey side, it's not that we're a facility that gets NHL guys. We have a handful of like junior guys and college guys that come in during the summer. But really the most impact that we have is, teaching kids more about character and how sports can help you in life. So obviously we have mostly house league kids that want to get stronger and travel kids that want to get stronger. But really, to me, it's much more powerful not to put guys in the NHL, but to teach them more and have them just to be an influence in their life, I guess.
Absolutely. And as we say this, it is Impact Week at the IOICA. Our friend Jim Kilbasso, people have been sharing their stories about Impact Week. But Brian, let's keep going. Any other takeaways from you that you've taken and kind of applied to your business?
Yeah, I think, and I didn't really know I was doing this, but it sort of clicked when I read that chapter. But so there's one of them is called Go for the Gap. So when you're on top of your game, the idea is to change your game. So basically what it means is when you've got it all down, or when you think that you've maxed out what you can do, that's exactly when you get stagnant. So for us, we've gone through some big changes when things were going relatively well. And if you just picture a graph or a line plotted on a chart or on a series, that's like the plateau part where you're doing fine or you're doing well, but nothing's really changing. But then when you make those changes, that's when you see that start to incline again and you make better changes. I mean, something as simple as, we kind of thought it was time to change the way we manage the gym, the software we use to manage the gym. So we made a change kind of at a crucial time, and it was kind of a pain in the ass for a while, but we ended up with a much better system and one that can do more for us and allows us to grow more in the future. So, it's just one of those things. It seems counterintuitive. Like when you have it dialed in, you think you should stay with that formula, but it's more important really to push the limits a little bit, and it keeps you growing and it keeps you learning as an entrepreneur, as an owner, and it also usually reflects well on your business.
Absolutely. And kind of segue in that, one of my favorites in this book is the Kiwi Kaizen, and Kaizen meaning constant improvement. And they were talking about, those marginal gains in if you made like a 1% difference in 100 things, think about, the change that happens that, you can't see so much as some of the bigger changes we make in the business. I really love that concept.
Yeah, and it's the growth mindset, it's the continued personal growth, it's the professional learner, all that kind of stuff. So that was huge for me.
Absolutely. Anything else?
We talked about Sweep the Sheds. That's the other one I definitely wanted to touch on. The other one, just really briefly, is Pass the Ball. So this is another lesson, another chapter. And it's about passing on responsibility and passing on leadership to those that that work with you. So you don't have to be the guy all the time. You don't have to be the number one. So it's about sort of leaders creating additional leaders. And so the example they use in the book is, this guy's car was being broken into repeatedly, and there was nothing he or the authorities could or would do to stop that from happening. So what the guy did was he kind of he left a note in his car, and it was about this tournament that he was putting together, a soccer tournament. And so what happened was they took these guys who were vandalizing cars and ended up sort of, I guess, unifying them and having them create their own teams and having them participate in this tournament. And now it's a huge yearly tournament. So you take guys that were sort of, I guess, were leaders, but they were leading in the wrong direction, and you empower them to lead in the right direction and use those skills for more good. So pass the ball is a big one for me, especially as somebody now who isn't at the facility all the time. So I want to make sure that in here, especially, I'm empowering other leaders.
Yeah, I think another one, the last one we'll talk about before we wrap it up, is the no dickheads. Better people make better All Blacks. Really just kind of talking about that character and really kind of from a business perspective. Coach Boyle always liked to use that term, certified nice people. You can teach somebody to train, or you can teach somebody your system, but you can't teach them really to be a nice person. So kind of hiring those people with the better character, your business is going to do so much better.
Yep, and you and I have touched on this a little bit too. People don't come to the facility because they just love to work out, especially adults. They don't come because they just really love working out. Some do, but a majority of the population just doesn't. So if they feel comfortable with somebody and they feel like a good connection with somebody who's friendly and supportive, then for sure they're going to enjoy their experience more, and they're going to stay longer. So yeah, that's huge too.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right though. This is one of those books that you can kind of, and the best books are, you almost have to read them 2 or 3 times sometimes, because you get so much, I was just kind of reviewing and I kind of forgot some of the stuff, right? That when you're like, oh yeah, I gotta, and then, you start to think about putting that into your business. So, but yeah, I'm glad you picked this. This was definitely a book that I really got a lot out of and enjoyed, I guess. Always the sports books help kind of go along for me.
Yeah, and I want to share a quote here, and I think, Ant, this applies to you for sure. So in the book, they talk about being a good ancestor to the program and leaving a legacy with the program. And so there's a Greek proverb that they use: "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they'll never see." And so that's just basically about contributing and making the jersey better and making the club a better place. And I think with all you're doing too, you're doing that to pave the way for a lot of young guys like me to leave this industry in a better place. So I think that applies to you. I just wanted to share that. And and thank you for having me on. And so keep planting trees, Ant. Keep it up.
All right. Well, thanks, Brian. I really appreciate you as well, and I love that you asked me to be on the show, and I'm glad that you picked this book, because we're gonna keep you in the rotation now, so you got to stay on your toes. So thanks for doing this, Brian.
I'm ready for it. Thanks, Ant.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 9 of Tell Me About That Book. Thanks to Brian Sipotz for coming on, sharing his thoughts, and for discussing legacy. Remember, any money made with sponsorships for this podcast will go directly to Inner City Weightlifting. You can find out more at tellmeaboutthatbook.com or continuefit.com. That's where I have all of my podcasts and all of my resources. So that's going to do it for today. Thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you next time.